They called it red light, green light. Don't ask me where the rules came from. They just were, like mold under the wallpaper in an old house, unnoticed until you start looking for them. We played in Danny Phelps's basement. Not the nice, finished basement with a TV and a rug, but the second one, behind the furnace, behind a crude plywood door his father called the storage room. The entrance didn't smell of earth and damp, but of something sharp, almost medicinal, like an old dentist's office. There was no light, only our flashlights, carving brick pillars and mountains of junk covered with tarps like sleeping beasts out of the darkness. The rules were simple and strange. The It stood with his back to the far wall, where a crack in the foundation seeped constantly, forming a dark, almost black rust stain like a blot of ink. He would shout, "Red light," and freeze. We had to move towards him from our corner. "Green light." He would turn around. If you moved even an eyelash, even if your flashlight's shadow twitched, you were out. Not just sat down, you had to step outside the circle of light and sit in the total, throat-clutching dark until the game was over. But there was another, unspoken, main, mysterious rule. The It never counted to 3. He just stood. And we weren't just moving towards him. We had to touch that black rust stain on the wall, behind his back. It was called the Heart. Touch it first, and you'd be the next It. And the game would start anew. That night, the It was Stephen Braxton. Big, clumsy, with a face that always looked slightly scared. He stood by the Heart, and we stood 20 feet from him, lined up. "Red light." His voice sounded muffled, as if swallowed by the masonry itself. We froze. I could only hear my own breathing and the rustle of Danny standing next to me. The silence stretched, not for 3 seconds, but for 30, for a full minute. "Green light," Stephen whispered and turned around. His eyes in the beams of our flashlights were round as coins. He wasn't looking at us, but through us, into the darkness behind our backs. He was pale as chalk. "Steve?" Danny called. "You okay?" Stephen didn't answer. He slowly turned back to the wall, his back to us. "Red light," he said, and his voice had something new in it, a kind of wet, sticky confidence. We took a few steps. The silence swallowed all sound again. It was thick, physical, and another sound appeared within it, a soft, steady, wet sound, squelch, 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 as if someone with wet, bare feet was slowly walking on the concrete somewhere behind us, in those labyrinths of junk. I looked back. Nothing. Only blackness devouring the flashlight beam. "Don't look back," Liz, standing to my left, hissed in a whisper. "The rules! Don't move when he turns." "Green light," Stephen said and turned around. This time he was smiling, a wide, unnatural smile, showing too many teeth. And from the darkness behind us, the sound of footsteps stopped. I felt a cold, thin sweat trickle down my spine. Someone or something was now standing right behind us, right up against our line. I felt it on my skin. "Move!" Stephen sang in his new, alien voice, and turned his back to us again. We inched forward like worms. I no longer wanted to touch the Heart. I only wanted one thing, for the game to be over. Squelch, squelch, squelch sounded again, but not from behind now, from the right, in the dark between a pile of old newspapers and a broken washing machine. I pointed my flashlight there. The wet floor reflected the light. Footprints, small, child-sized wet footprints, leading deeper in. "Red light," Stephen said. We froze. I was 10 feet from him, the closest. I could see his back trembling, as if he was quietly laughing. Silence. Then right by my ear, a child's thin, thoroughly soaked whisper. "I am playing too." I gasped and jerked. Stephen squealed with delight and spun around. "Moved! You moved! he shouted, pointing a finger at me. His eyes glittered with madness. "Into the dark! Go into the dark!" I stepped back. My friends looked at me not with fear, but with a strange, empty relief. I was the scapegoat, the sacrifice the darkness had already chosen. I backed away from the circle of light to where the footprints were lost in the gloom. My flashlight slipped from my sweaty palms and shattered. The last thing I saw was Liz taking the next step towards Stephen and his wide, hungry grin. I sat on the cold concrete, hugging my knees. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive. It enveloped like jelly and whispered. Not with words, but with sensations. The smell of wet wool and old plastic. The sound of dripping water that wasn't dripping from the rust stain, but right above my head. And I saw eyes. Small, faintly glowing green points like a frog's. They didn't approach, they just watched. And in the circle of light, the game continued. Stephen no longer said red light, green light. He just turned when he wanted, and every time he did, one of them froze wrong, too sharply, or started to cry. And then that one was sent to join me in the dark. Next was Danny. He bumped into me in the blackness, whimpering. "There's something there," he whispered, clutching my arm. "It walks between us. It touches us when Steve turns away." He was right. In the light of the one remaining flashlight, Liz's, I could see it. When Stephen stood with his back turned and Liz and Mike moved towards him, the shadows from the pillars bent. They stretched out like tentacles and slid over the children's shoulders, their hair. And at that touch they shuddered but didn't scream, as if they already understood it was part of the game. Liz was the last. She almost reached the heart. Her fingers were an inch from the black blot. "Red light," Stephen said, and turned around. But he didn't turn 180 degrees. His head rotated a full 360 with a quiet, crunching creak like an owl's. And the smile wasn't just on his face now, it was on the back of his head. The same stretched, wet grimace. Liz screamed, and she was out. Now the three of us sat in the dark and watched as Stephen Braxton, or whatever had taken him over, stood alone in the circle of light from Liz's flashlight lying on the floor. Slowly, like a marionette, he raised his own hand and touched his palm to the black rust stain on the wall. "I touched the heart," his voice gurgled. "I am it." And then the flashlight went out. Complete, perfect darkness. And within it, sound. Squelch, squelch, squelch. Many small, wet feet. They were walking in a circle around us. There were many of them. A whole carousel. And a whisper layering over itself like an echo in a well. Red light, green light, red light, green light. They were playing. Those who had lost before us. Those whom the game had taken forever into this basement, into this eternal shift of red and green. And then the footsteps stopped, right in front of me. Cold, damp fingers touched my forehead. A child's plaintive little voice whispered, "You are it." 30 years have passed. I'm writing this by lamplight, but I still have to look over my shoulder because I am still it. Sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear that whisper from the socket, from the vent, from under the bed. Red light. And I have to freeze, completely. Even my heart tries to beat quieter, because if I move, I will see them. Small, wet silhouettes in the doorway. Waiting for the moment to move. Waiting for me to turn around. And I know the rule, the main, secret rule I only understood then, in the dark. The game never ends. It only gets passed on, like a virus, like a curse. And if you, reading this, suddenly felt a chill down your spine and heard a quiet wet squelch somewhere in the corner of the room, Don't turn around. Just freeze and whisper to yourself, green light, green light, green light, green.